Before we start the stories, I'd like to greet you a good day. Feel free to use headphones if you want, and if possible, comment where you're from and what time you're listening to these stories. Now let's begin. This happened back in the spring of 2017 when I was working nights for a private alarm response company in Wichita, Kansas. Basically, whenever alarms went off in businesses or buildings around town, I'd be the guy sent out to check it out. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and for the most part it was easy. Most of the time it was just false alarms or motion sensors tripped by spiders or a bad gust of wind through a drafty window. One night around 2:30 in the morning, I got a dispatch call for a funeral chapel on the edge of town. The operator told me it wasn't just a single motion detector going off. It was a multi-zone trigger. Several different sensors in different rooms had gone off in sequence, like something was moving around the building. That was rare. Usually, if multiple sensors tripped, it meant someone had actually broken in. So I headed out. The streets were dead quiet, and the sky had that faint glow from the streetlights that made the whole neighborhood look washed out. The funeral chapel sat alone on a corner lot, dark as hell, except for one dim emergency light in the front hall that I could see through the glass doors. I pulled into the lot, parked, and called the monitoring company from my phone. The operator told me the activity was coming from the preparation wing, the area where the bodies were worked on and stored before services. That instantly made the whole call creepier. I had responded to schools, doctors' offices, even a factory once, but I had never gone alone into a funeral home at night. Walking toward the building, all I could think about was how many bodies were probably inside, and the fact that I was about to go looking around them. I got the front door open with the key from our company box and stepped in. My flashlight beam cut across the hallway, catching the glossy floor tiles and rows of closed office doors. The place was silent except for the faint hum of the lights. I started making my way back to the prep area, every step echoing louder than it should have in the empty building. When I reached the hall where the morgue was, I noticed right away that the door was cracked open. That wasn't supposed to happen. Those doors were always kept shut and locked at night for obvious reasons. I remember standing there for a second, debating whether I should even bother looking inside. But it was my job, so I pushed the door all the way open and stepped in. The smell hit me first. That chemical, almost sweet odor you get in funeral homes was stronger here. In the middle of the room, on a stainless steel table, there was a body. It was in the middle of preparation. Tubes were still connected, and tools were laid out on a tray beside it. Whoever had been working here clearly left in a hurry. The room was cold, and the silence was thick. I tried to stay professional and started walking the perimeter of the room, checking for signs of forced entry. That's when it happened. I had just gotten to the far wall when I heard a sound that made my blood turn cold. The body on the table wheezed. I spun around, and I swear I saw the chest rise just a little, like it was struggling for air. The head, which had been turned slightly to one side, now seemed angled in my direction. For a moment, I thought I was losing my mind. The corpse looked like it was alive. My flashlight shook in my hand as I backed up toward the door. Before I could process what I'd just seen, the tall metal frame standing next to the table suddenly tipped over and crashed to the ground. The metallic clang echoed through the room, and I almost dropped my light. That's when something small darted past my leg and out the open door. It moved too fast for me to make it out, but I knew it wasn't human. My first thought was a dog or something, but inside a morgue? It didn't make sense. I rushed out into the hall and swung my light back and forth, but whatever it was had already disappeared down the corridor. My heart was racing so bad I could barely think straight. I called dispatch right away and reported everything I had seen. They got in touch with the funeral home's manager and put me on hold while I stood there in that silent building, staring at the open morgue door. When the manager finally called back, she explained what probably happened. Apparently, the embalmer had been working late that night but suddenly got sick. She was so nauseous that she left in a rush, planning to go home, take some medicine, and come back, but she never did. In her hurry, she left a side window cracked open to let the chemical smell out and didn't secure the body. That left the building wide open for something else to get in. The manager guessed that a raccoon had slipped inside through the window. It must have been hiding when I walked in, and when it ran across the corpse's chest on its way out, it forced the air left in the lungs to wheeze out. That sound, in the dead silence of the morgue at 2:30 in the morning, was enough to make it feel like the dead were coming back to life. As for the metal frame stand tipping over, the raccoon probably bumped it while bolting toward the door. It was a rational explanation, but at the time it didn't make me feel much better. I had to go back in and finish the sweep, cover the body, and close the window. Every second I was in that room again, I felt like the corpse was about to move. I finished up, reset the alarms, and got the hell out of there. The raccoon was never found, and the alarms didn't trip again that night. Still, to this day, when I think about that sound, the wheeze of air escaping a dead man's chest in the middle of the night, it makes me shiver. For a moment, I really believed I was standing in that room with someone who wasn't completely gone. And no matter how rational the explanation is, the image of that corpse looking right at me has never left my mind. This happened to me back in the summer of 2015 when I worked as a night security guard for a school district in northern Arizona. It wasn't the greatest job, but it paid my bills. Most nights were the same routine, just driving between schools, checking that doors were locked, making sure kids weren't sneaking into the fields or gyms. Usually it was dead quiet. Honestly, I liked that part of it. One night, I was sitting in my car near one of the elementary schools when dispatch came through my radio. They said a group of kids had just called in, claiming they were on the high school football field and that a guard should come check. That was strange right away. Who calls security on themselves when they're trespassing? It didn't add up, but I was told to respond, so I started heading that way. The high school was about 15 minutes from where I was. The drive was pitch black, only broken up by a few streetlights. About halfway there, my supervisor came over the radio. He told me not to go to the school, that he was going to handle the call himself. No reason why, just said he'd take care of it. That caught me off guard. Normally, he never jumped in on calls like that. I pulled into a gas station to grab a drink and wait. I remember just sitting there in the lot with a Gatorade, thinking about how weird it was. It didn't feel like a normal call. Something about it felt wrong. Maybe 20 minutes later, the radio crackled again. My supervisor's voice was different this time. Lower, more serious. He told me he had called the police to meet him at the school before checking the field. Together, they searched the place and found 3 teenagers hiding in the bushes near the bleachers. At first, that didn't sound too unusual. Kids sneak into schools all the time. But then he told me they were each carrying hunting knives. And the way they were crouched low in the bushes by the path that led from the parking lot to the field, it was obvious they weren't just hanging out. They were waiting for somebody to walk by. Police said the kids admitted they had called dispatch themselves. They said it was supposed to be a prank. But when the cops searched their bags, they also found rope and duct tape. You don't bring rope and duct tape for a prank. That's when it sank in. If my supervisor hadn't pulled me off that call, I would have walked right into it. I would have pulled into that parking lot, grabbed my flashlight, and headed to the field like I always did. And those kids would have been waiting. I remember just sitting in the car at that gas station with my heart racing, realizing how close I came to that. For the next few weeks, the job felt different. Every time I got out to check a door, I thought about it. How easy it would be for someone to set a trap like that, to just wait for a guard to show up. I quit security a couple months after that. People laughed when I told them why. They said it was just kids messing around. But I know better. Kids don't bring hunting knives, rope, and duct tape to play a prank. They were planning something much worse. What still keeps me up sometimes is the detail my supervisor told me later. He said when the cops first shined their flashlights at those bushes, all they saw were 3 sets of eyes staring back, just watching, waiting. And I know one thing for sure. If he hadn't stopped me that night, I don't think I'd be here telling this story. This happened back in the fall of 2016, when I was 22 years old. At the time, I was living in Billings, Montana, working part-time at this 24-hour grocery store called Prairie Mart. It wasn't exactly a glamorous job, but it helped me pay rent while I was taking community college classes. The shift I hated most was the closing one around midnight. By then, the store was completely dead, and it would just be me and my manager, Mr. Howard, locking everything down and cleaning up. Mr. Howard was in his 50s, kind of short and stocky, a really straightforward kind of guy. The type of boss that didn't joke around, but you always felt safe when he was around. He'd been working in retail forever, so when he got spooked by something, you knew it wasn't nothing. That night, it was about 11:45 p.m. when we finished the last of the cleaning and started the routine of locking doors, shutting down registers, and doing inventory checks. Everything was normal, until we both heard this sound at the front entrance. Now, our front door was one of those automatic glass sliding doors, the kind you see at Walmart or a CVS. We'd locked it earlier, obviously, since we were closed. But while I was sanitizing the front counter, I heard this faint scraping noise against the glass. At first, I thought maybe it was just the wind blowing a plastic bag or something. Mr. Howard thought maybe it was a stray raccoon. Billings has its share of those. But when we went to check, the sound stopped. Nothing was there. We both shrugged it off, but about 10 minutes later, while Mr. Howard was in the back room counting inventory, I heard him shout. His voice echoed through the stockroom and carried across the entire store. He came stomping out, pale and shaking his head, saying there was scratching at the back delivery door now. The weird part, that back door doesn't even have an outside handle. You can only open it from inside. Whoever or whatever was out there was clawing at the metal violently, like they were trying to dig their way in. He told me he'd yelled at them, told them he was calling the cops, and just like that, the scratching stopped. But when he opened the door to look, there was no one there. Only claw marks, low on the door, like something had dragged sharp nails into the steel. I followed him back up front, both of us pretty uneasy now. He was telling me exactly what he saw when the noise started again. The same scratching, only this time it was back at the front glass. I remember the way both of us froze at the same time. We turned toward the door, and I'll never forget what I saw. Pressing against the glass was a pale, human-like hand, but the fingers were too long, and at the end of each one was this long, black claw that tapped against the window as it dragged downward. And above it, two reflective eyes, glowing faintly under the parking lot lights. We both just stared at it, unable to move. Mr. Howard snapped out of it first and grabbed the phone, dialing 911. I grabbed the heaviest thing near me, which was this giant flashlight we kept by the register. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. The scratching stopped again, but then we both heard this low growl outside. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't even close to a dog. It was deeper, almost vibrating through the glass, but at the same time, it sounded human. I'll never forget the way Mr. Howard looked at me when we heard it. He wasn't just scared, he was terrified. This man who'd been working night shifts longer than I'd been alive looked like he wanted to bolt. When the police finally showed up, we both nearly ran out the door to meet them. An officer shined his flashlight around the lot and escorted us back toward the building. We were explaining what happened, trying not to sound insane, when we all froze at the exact same time. From the corner of the building, just barely sticking its head out, was a face. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person. It was something in between. Its skin looked pale, almost grayish, and its eyes reflected the light like a cat's. But it was crouched low to the ground, peeking at us like it was waiting for us to make the wrong move. And here's the part that made my blood run cold. The officer saw it too. He muttered, "What the hell is that?" before it darted back behind the corner. He ordered us into our cars, and we followed his cruiser down the street until we regrouped at a gas station not too far away. There, the officer admitted he couldn't explain it. He called in a few other units to drive by the store and sweep the area, but nothing was ever found. The security footage didn't show anything unusual either, just us looking terrified on camera. The scratching sounds, the claw marks, they were all real. But whatever was making them, it was smart enough to avoid being caught on tape. The officer suggested maybe it was some elaborate prank, but you could tell from his voice he didn't believe that himself. Nothing like that ever happened at Prairie Mart again. At least not while I worked there. I quit closing shifts after that night. Couldn't bring myself to stay past sundown.